asking potential clients for loss runs?
I think the biggest issue is what you brought up earlier. I mean, just past experiences, asking for loss runs on an account you're bidding on, then having them ask their agent. Then this goes into the second part about why it's frustrating in this business is the blocking of the markets, right? And how do you explain that to an insured saying, hey, I'm not asking for an agent of record, but maybe an assignment of markets, a little more clear. But that becomes, I think it just becomes so exhaustive, right? They make the process so difficult for the insured that they don't want to deal with it.
And that's the thing. That is the thing. Like us saying we're trying to make it as easy as a clue report is not to make it easier on us. It's to make it easier on the customer.
Correct.
Yep.
All of these carriers and MGAs that are just so antiquated in their processes, instead of looking at how do we protect the business we've got, they need to be thinking about how do we make this easier on the customer? What does the customer want? And then let's reverse engineer back into our processes instead of trying, it's playing defense versus playing offense. Sorry to interrupt you.
Well, and one thing too that I'm not a designer, but I am big on branding and logos and things like that. And one thing I like about your model, the fact that you do the logo and you do the printing, is one thing I don't think some people think about. And I know some people don't think about this because I see logos that fit this description, that they design a logo, but don't ever think about all the other mediums that logo is going to be on. In other words, if you take, say, what's a really good logo?
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
Standard, yeah.
Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola logo looks exactly the same on a computer screen as it does on a hat, as it does on a T-shirt, as it does on a koozie.
Yeah.
And you don't want your logo to look great on the computer, but then as soon as you transfer it over to a hat, it completely looks completely different.
Yeah.
And I see so many logos driving down the road. Boy, I bet that looks awful on a hat.
Yeah, exactly.
So with you doing the printing, you can kind of, I imagine, take that into account when you're designing that logo.
Yeah.
I think ease of doing business on the consumer side and on the agent side is so important to carriers nowadays.
Right.
And there's carriers that we have that, to be frank, I know we're not going to have long term because they don't make it easy for us to do business with them. And it's as important as it is on the customer side. I think it's 10 times more important on the agent side for the carrier, because if I've got to, click Control 0, Control F5 every time to make the rater work, and if I've got to be on Internet Explorer, and even if I like that carrier, I'm just inherently not going to gravitate towards them as much as I would somebody else. We have carriers that I'm not particularly fond of as much as other ones, but we put more business with them because it's just easier, and I know there's people listening thinking, young buck, you're going to learn a thing or two. No, it doesn't have to be the way we've always done it, right? There's an easier user experience out there.
The gap between online underwriting questions and what agents ask is wider than the Grand Canyon.
Give us where your mindset was during that tweet and what provoked it. Also leaving out things that can get you and us sued.
I'm with you. I've become more frustrated since the start of COVID and how increasingly difficult underwriting has gotten. And I got a call the other day, and guy has a couple semis, needs a quote, and he's with another carrier, and they're looking a little too hard on maybe the driving record of one of his drivers. And so you go out to like an Ask Kodiak, you find out who's going to write this type of trucking risk. And I'm plugging in this quote for 2 semis. And just the questions that I ask this individual, trucks, what are you hauling? How far are you going? We looked at the safer report, and that's basically it. And then I get into the underwriting questions of a carrier, and they're asking me things like, has this prospect been insured with our company before? How am I supposed to know that?
Right.
And why don't you already know that as a carrier?
That's kind of where my mind's at also. Does the applicant have a driver safety program? We'll need a copy of it. Yeah, I printed this off right here. Has the applicant filed bankruptcy in the last 10 years? And I'm just thinking, all I want to do is find out if we're competitive.
Right.
If, like, what is the number? And then we can go forward through the underwriting process. And by the time I've gone through this quote, it's taken 25 minutes to get the decline because I probably answered a question the wrong way. And I just thought to myself, what underwriters are looking for and the information that they're getting and what I'm entering in on a website or what my staff is entering in on a website is not at all what we just asked that prospect that called into the office. And so I just think there's this huge disconnect between what carriers are looking for. And I also think there's a huge disconnect on what information the carriers are getting. You know, they're asking us for stuff that I think a lot of people, in order to get the quote, are just putting in data.
Yeah.
Well, and two, I think, and not to bang the Tarmica drum any harder, but that's where tools like Tarmica could come in handy from a data standpoint, because if, you know, we've got 5 carriers on Tarmica right now, and there's one carrier in particular that every time I get done with the quote, I have to answer extra questions for that carrier. Well, if these other 4 people that are 4 carriers that are very comparable to you aren't asking those questions, A, why are you asking it? And B, why are they able to ask and get a more accurate rate without asking those questions, you know?
No, you know, I mean, obviously that's not ideal. However, that's kind of, you know, in every negotiation there's a counter. That's kind of where I figured the counter would be. So no surprise there, really no questions. Other than, you know, how do you guys, and this may be one of his questions, how do you guys see this flowing in terms of making sure we capture every person that comes through? You know, because the correct way to do an affiliate deal like this is what I would consider this. It would be to do some sort of thing based on the cookies, and, you know, if the person's visited our site and then also signed up. That's a little bit more difficult to do, obviously. The easier way that we've done this in the past is, you know, .com/insurance guys, and have a little landing page. Zoom call for the Protege, which is the insurance reality show that I'm on. This is a Zoom call with our team. So I'm a coach / judge, I guess. We did a draft on Friday, to draft our team. So this is the first kind of session with those folks. To echo that, you know, the reason I joined, obviously having somewhat of the marketing side down, I needed to be around people who were writing the size accounts that I wanted to write so I could lean on them. And it's been worth it to me just to have access not only to the group, but to David. You know, we had Cincinnati is one carrier, Josh, that we have not been able to get yet, although we've had some talks with them. And the rep at the time, it's no longer the rep, lived about 3 hours from me. And I picked up the phone and called him. It's like, hey man, I'm gonna be in your area in a week. Would love to grab lunch with you. And he's like, okay, sure. And so then I went out to my team and I was like, somebody find me a meeting in that town. That way I'm not like just creepy going to see him, you know. And it turns out a guy that was working for me made a couple calls, and we booked a meeting with a $100,000 revenue or $200,000 revenue account. And so I met with the guy, and I came back, and he sent me an email that was kind of a put off, sort of. It was meant to be a put off, and I actually let Carruthers actually wrote the response to the guy for me. Basically, literally wrote it, and I copied and pasted it. And I CC'd the producer on it, and he walked in here and said, where did that come from? And just honestly, just like, even though it's a funny story, like just having David, you know, the resources there, like, hey, how, just to get another set of eyes on it that thinks so differently from the way that I think, you know, is completely invaluable. And especially since he and everyone in the group understands the marketing side and the business, commercial, insurance-y side of it, being able to marry those two and say, hey, check out this campaign I just put together, or check out this, let me know what you think, is really invaluable.